The long and storied history of Call of Duty Zombies is full of twists and turns, especially when it comes to the first major DLC map releasing in the game's seasonal lifecycle. This is a chance for developers to make a statement to the fanbase on what their game is about, perpetuating concepts from launch maps while innovating on ideas from previous Zombies experiences spanning over the last 16 years. And while innovation seems simple on its face, as soon as we dig a little deeper, we often learn it's anything but, as the push and pull between Treyarch and the Zombies community tends to be quite erratic, as over the years developers try their damnedest to find the perfect ingredients that make Zombies content. Enter in Citadelle des Morts, the first DLC map for Black Ops 6 Zombies, firing on all cylinders by taking advantage of the momentum from the mode's highly successful release. This Zombies experience takes many of the brilliant ideas Treyarch has implemented in previous Zombies titles by presenting them in a more modern fashion, while feeding into the accessibility era that Kevin Drew and other developers are heavily leaning into, with of course some surprises hidden beneath the map's surface. But what does this mean for Citadelle? Does it lack the depth, identity, and replayability fans have become accustomed to? Or has Treyarch brought the Zombies mode to heights unseen? Well, let's blow the doors off of this castle to find out if Citadelle des Morts has failed to reach its full potential.
It is not far.
When thinking about the launch of any upcoming Call of Duty title, I always wonder what exactly is going through the developer's minds. Because on one hand, the core launch content, things like campaign and multiplayer, needs to push the boundaries of what the players are used to, but that innovation has to be built upon an infrastructure of familiarity so that the players are not drowning in a sea of never-before-seen mechanics. This is an impossible standard to adhere to, as the developers toe a line of alienating the simplicity or roots of what made the franchise great, but they're also boring people with repetition of the same old gameplay loop. And as I'm sure you are aware, this is a dance that we have seen repeatedly over the years that inevitably leaves some segment of the fanbase disappointed.
Train go boom.
Now, when it comes to Zombies, the same sentiment surely applies, but there usually is a bit more wiggle room when it comes to creativity, or at least there used to be, but we'll touch on that later. Over the years, the launch Zombies experiences were more or less designed to level up the Zombies franchise in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was Keener der Toten tightening up the gameplay loop after Der Riese, Transit trying to push open world gameplay, or Shadows of Evil's unique blend of new and old mechanics, along with a Lovecraftian Art Deco stylization which was quite controversial for the time, there was always something alongside these cutting-edge pieces of content to make the medicine go down a little easier. Because let's be honest here, a lot of people are not interested in accelerated change inside of their video games, which is why Treyarch tends to pair their more imaginative content with easygoing maps like Farm, Nuketown Zombies, and of course, the Giant. But it wasn't until the next and first DLC map where Treyarch would continue to push their experimentation ever so slightly over the edge, while officially declaring what Black Ops Zombies would look like for that particular year. Now, we can argue until we're blue in the face about whether or not the changes that DLC 1 map packs brought to the table were a net positive, but to say that no innovations occurred at all is just not true. Ascension brought the franchise's first main quest, updated special enemy rounds, new perks, and equipment. Die Rise continued with Zelensky's unique map design while also introducing verticality. Der Rise and Drac leveled things up drastically with not only the map's art design, but brought some of the best elemental wonder weapons we have ever seen to date. They also introduced the first ever main quest boss battle inside of Treyarch Zombies, a new precedent that obviously escalated magnificently throughout the Black Ops 3 lifecycle. And there are so many more examples I can showcase here. However, at the end of the day, the result usually remains the same, as Treyarch's DLC 1 plans of perpetuating innovation percolate to the surface. And so now that we understand these game development fundamentals, the question then becomes, does Black Ops 6 Zombies follow this same blueprint? Well, the answer is mostly yes, but there seems to be a bit of friction between the stances of the developers and various segments of the community regarding ideas of profoundness or ingenuity. It is true that all of the major gameplay and map innovations were focused on Terminus to establish the foundation and direction of BO6 Zombies, which was then paired wonderfully with Liberty Falls, making it that much more palatable Zombies experience for the masses. But now that Citadelle des Morts is here, Treyarch should be following suit of what previous DLC 1 experiences did. right? Well, like we just discussed, overall, it's mostly true that the developers absolutely delivered, but there are quite a few underwhelming instances which were perhaps overlooked by Treyarch, leaving me often scratching my head befuddled. And so on one hand, while I think it's clear that the core mission of DLC 1 was successful, I would be lying to you if I said that there weren't some glaring problems inside of the overarching package that have me hesitating to say, I know where this game is now going. When DLC 1 was teased at COD Next, the dev team was clearly excited about the upcoming experience, which gave fans hope that our crew was going to be going somewhere a little different in terms of location. This paired with the fact that Treyarch had specifically told content creators that each location throughout the DLC 1 lifecycle was going to be original and not a standard facility like we saw inside of Cold War Zombies. And while BO6 Zombies art direction and map design is off to a solid start, as both Terminus and Liberty Falls are special in their own ways, they still lacked the mystique and otherworldliness previous maps before them had displayed. So when it was revealed that Citadelle des Morts was going to be taking place inside of a worn-down French castle, the community's ears began to perk up, as this appeared to be the first time since 2019 that zombies had been let off the leash. When you watch the promotional material for Citadelle des Morts, the first impression of the map is that it is saturated heavily inside of a chaotic whirlwind of supernatural storytelling. And to a certain extent, that is true. There is the sun peeking through the rolling fog, disheveled architecture all around you that has been tagged by teenagers and other derelicts. There are even subtle hints of the castle feeling alive, with these chests that rock back and forth, implying some sort of danger if you break them open. It's beautiful, eerie, and unsettling all at the same time. The inception of this castle began in 750 AD, where it was known as the Abbey des Oublis, aka the Abbey of the Forgotten, where it served as a leprosarium to house those suffering with the horrific disease of leprosy. But its history doesn't stop there, as it survived construction of a keep by the Queen of France, the hiding of secret relics from the Crusades, and even off-target bombings during World War II. However, as of now, it currently rests under occupation of the French syndicate, who have molded it into a large-scale narcotics operation where they both create and sell their product. What is wonderful about Citadelle des Morts is you can feel that something is off here from the moment you step into the premises. When the player first loads into the map, we spawn inside of a large courtyard with an enormous statue looming overhead. And while it's clear that the statue has something to do with the main quest, it's not so obvious how to activate whatever secret it may be holding. A tavern and cellar area are located at the back end of the spawn room, which bring about a lovely quaint tone that reminds you this village was once populated with citizens not too long ago, despite the fact there is a large glowing portal on the wall. But we can suspend our disbelief for just a moment, can't we? That theme continues, as from the spawn area, the player is able to take one of two routes: a dirt road which leads up to a small barn, the other a cobblestone street aligned with shops, apartments, and a wishing well. Whichever route you decide to take, the view is breathtaking, and the level of detail lining each path are shimmering with that unmistakable Treyarch polish. Once inside the castle walls, things start to become a little more serious, as there are remnants from the French syndicate lying everywhere. Piles of drugs, cutting agents, and other paraphernalia lay out near Melee Macchiato, while a communications room near Elemental Pop sits empty over top one of their vans near the entrance of the courtyard. But underneath all of the syndicate's mess lies the disgruntled history of the castle, as messages written in blood are smeared all over the walls, oil traps hover gracefully atop the castle's crumbling brick ledges, while a beautifully designed lion cannon patiently sits just begging to be fired. And while our new old friend wants us to not make a scene when entering the castle, it seems like our crew has other plans.
Our comrades will find a way. Comrades, please, make it a quiet way.
The portcullis is now in mere splinters, while the larger chunks of charred wood sit aflame as we finally make our way into Citadelle des Morts. While it would have been cool to fight a horde of zombies or a slew of doppelgasts after blowing down the entryway, this idea was really clever in terms of the overarching narrative themes that take place inside of the larger Dark Aether story. Our crew is tired, restless, and determined to capture Richtofen no matter what the cost, fitting snugly into their no-holds-barred mindset. Plus, it's also a really stellar way to enter into a zombies map. But once inside the castle, it's clear that things are tense, as there is a strictly claustrophobic setting right from the jump. Interestingly enough, due to the high ceilings, staircases, and ability to loop around the entrance hall, the first impression Treyarch wants you to have is that the castle feels like there is plenty of space to move around. But the further you push into the castle, you realize that is most certainly not the case. But we'll touch on that a bit later in the video. The art design continues to be some of Treyarch's better work since the days of Black Ops 4, with the main level highlighting different features regarding the map's history and current-day illegalities. The dining hall showcases the suits of armor along with the unexploded bomb from the off-target bombings during World War II. Sitting rooms lay adjacently on the other side of the castle wall, where it looks like the French syndicate foot soldiers laid in wait while curating their narcotics. The alchemical lab is a centerpiece inside of this castle, which is completely sealed up using fake stone walls. This is a beautiful area with a warm glow of candlelight, while hinting towards the dark sorcery left behind from those who were here before us. But that's not all, as the bowels of Citadelle des Morts are fully accessible, as attached to both the dining hall and the sitting rooms are two pathways which lead you deeper into the castle. The Undercroft and dungeon area are both repulsive sections where you wouldn't dare to send your most formidable enemies. The Undercroft in particular holds roughly ankle-deep water that has been there for God only knows how long, with decaying historical artifacts resting in its corners. The dungeon is also grotesque in its nature, as the prison conditions are barbaric, but the cooler temperature lighting makes things seem a bit less daunting as a passerby. Both of these areas lead to the Oubliette, likely the main room for the French syndicate's drug smuggling operation, as kilos stack the tables alongside jars of chemicals, test tubes, and other materials needed for chemical synthesis. Clearly, Citadelle des Morts is a very visually appealing map that not only caters to the eye candy stylization that Zombies fans have been typically used to from over the years, but it does so in a mostly original fashion by using French history, magic, and the degeneracy of the European drug trade. And while Treyarch's art department executed their vision stupendously, the main quest, narrative, and atmosphere on the other hand are purely surface level and are lacking that depth and detail normally paired with a map that is perceived to be as fantastical as this. As once you start diving in and the cracks begin to appear, it becomes quite obvious that the exploration and magic that we have seen in such peak experiences like Origins, Der Reisendrak, and Ancient Evil, it all vanishes into thin air, making the beauty of Citadelle des Morts purely skin deep. One of the things that makes Zombies maps so special is the unique way that stories have been told inside of the mode. This largely has to do with the DLC cycle, with a new map coming out every few months. But despite that large gap in between content, Treyarch had always found a way to make it work. The recipe is a blend between housing a primary narrative that spans throughout the entire year by bringing new chunks of that story from map to map, as well as having a self-contained story with underlying subplots baked into it. This has always been executed by using in-game cinematics, radios, writings on the walls, in-map character quotes, and the map's main quest to help sell the map as its own unique Zombies experience. This would not only serve to make the map more eventful, but would also help develop the characters, making their individual arcs more compelling. And when looking at Citadelle des Morts on paper, it uses this same page out of the COD Zombies playbook, but unfortunately Treyarch leaves so much meat on the bone here that Citadelle ends up having many missed opportunities, which is such a waste when you think about how much potential the setting and storyline could truly offer. But first things first, we need to understand why our characters are here at this castle and what their purpose is inside of it. Well, at the end of Terminus's main quest, we had destroyed Patient 13, which then revealed a cutscene where we learned that Richtofen was obsessing over the Sentinel artifact and looking into a mysterious substance known as Prima Materia. Gabriel Kraft had also been kidnapped and tortured by Sergei Ravenov, an old ally now working for the French syndicate. He was doing this in order to pull answers from Kraft about the Sentinel artifact, as Richtofen was paying the syndicate to find information and/or the location of this alchemic legend. And while it's been amazing to see the Chaos, Vanguard, and Cold War storyline threads weave together so effortlessly, there are quite a number of cliffhangers here to leave on both Liberty Falls and Terminus, implying that the next map, in this case DLC 1, has some big narrative shoes to fill. And based on what we've discussed in this video so far about the precedent that DLC 1 sets, this means Treyarch needs to answer some of these bigger narrative questions, bring about new information for the fans to theorize about, while also holding a self-contained story all at the same time. This is no easy feat, but it's DLC 1 we're talking about. And while Citadelle des Morts does follow suit here, the map barely scratches the surface on any of those parameters, other than providing middling resolution to an uninteresting subplot and introducing even more questions after the main quest was solved, which we will touch on in a few moments. When our crew arrives in Citadelle, they stumble upon a drunken Ravenov who by all accounts has undergone some radical changes in his life, as he went from one of the most upstanding members of the Cold War cast to a drunken criminal torturing people for cash. Clearly he is surprised by seeing Weaver, Gray, and Carver, as he believed them all to be incapacitated in one way or another. But he was mostly taken aback by Peck being present, as not long ago they were mortal enemies fighting through the Cold War and for humanity itself, diverting both Peck's war Warheads and the Forsaken away from he and Kravchenko. Weaver states the purpose of their arrival and that they are looking for a man named Gabriel Kraft, where Ravenov then replies that he is not only a prisoner, but the French syndicate was paid millions of dollars to find and torture him to learn about the information he was holding at any costs. This particular detail doesn't hold much weight in the early moments of the intro cutscene, as it would make sense Richtofen would pay exorbitant costs in order to find the Sentinel artifact in the source of Prima Materia itself. But later, we will learn just how much deeper Ravenov's initial throwaway line goes. Maya also has her own individual reasons for coming to Avalon, as the leader of the French syndicate, Franco, is partly responsible for sending her brother Nathan to Terminus, turning him into the monstrosity we killed during the mid-quest boss fight. As the player begins to navigate through the map, Treyarch pokes and prods at our nostalgia while the characters have a slightly tense and pensive reunion. We then blow down the doors to get inside, unlock a caged beast to reveal a bloodstone to open up Pack-a-Punch, only to finally stumble upon Kraft as a disheveled, caged, and broken man. However, when he sees us, his head perks up as he recognizes us, knowing why we are here and what the purpose is of our mission.
You. I know who you are and why you are here. To obtain the Sentinel artifact, you will first need an amulet hidden in this castle.
That is more than I could get from him all week.
Listen closely. Up in the Oculus tools. Citadelle. I gave you the means to find the amulet. Now hurry. The Syndicate cannot be allowed to obtain the Sentinel artifact. It must never fall into his hands.
As you can see, there has been a lot of buildup in setting the stage here, as this is vitally important to the claims made earlier in this video about this Zombies experience looking fantastic on the surface, but as soon as you begin to peel back its layers, everything begins to fall apart. While the Sentinel artifact is our ultimate goal, Kraft had mentioned that in order to find it, we would need to acquire something else first, an amulet that was hidden by Guy de Saint-Michel, who had 4 bastard sons who were constantly seeking their father's attention. Guy de Saint-Michel, also known as the Owl, was a man with an outstanding reputation and responsible for convincing those in power that the Knights Templar were committing heresy, where the final knight remaining of the Knights Templar was burned at the stake in Paris. However, the Owl had escaped to Avalon with the help of his illegitimate sons, whose names are lost to history, but his secrets are buried deep within Citadelle des Morts. This castle clearly has such tremendous history baked into it, but if it wasn't for Treyarch's blog post, some quotes from Kraft, and a few pieces of intel left lying around, you'd never know, as the presentation of all of this wonderful magic and torment is essentially hidden from the player by the overriding goal of accessibility via simplistic gameplay mechanics. All this to say, in order to find the amulet, we need to complete puzzles that the Owl has left for his bastards, meaning we need to unlock each bastard sword, upgrade it to the corresponding elemental variant, while also seeking out another magical item known as incantations. To pick up any of the bastard swords is as easy as waiting until round 10 to kill a zombie wearing a knight's helmet, picking up a stamp that dropped from him, and then interacting with whichever particular sword the player feels like upgrading. And now we have seen steps like this before where zombies possess an item and we have to wait for that zombie to spawn in to then collect that item. One of the more obvious examples to this would be in Zetsubo no Shima, when the zombie is holding onto that green vial that we need to build the wonder weapon. In a vacuum, this isn't an issue, but inside of Zetsubo, this is one of 3 items needed to collect in order to build the KT-44, and inside of Citadelle des Morts, this is just a passive item that drops for each sword, making the initiation of the step so underwhelming. Once the stamp has been used, the knight holding the sword simply moves a bit to then present the base bastard sword to the player, and other than a nice music cue to emphasize this is a special moment, there is nothing to indicate the potential power this weapon can behold. And this continues within each of the upgrading processes as well, as the fire or dragon sword simply has the player interact with 3 flaming cauldrons and run back to the castle. The light or lion sword has us kill 4 glowing parasites to then cast that glow onto a secret room where we complete a very underwhelming puzzle. The shadow or raven sword has us complete a very simple puzzle while collecting alchemical symbols by transferring them into dark ether portals, where the sword then enters the dark ether only to return more powerful. The lightning or stag sword has us complete a mini lockdown of sorts, transferring lightning strikes to medieval lightning rods so that the sword can then soak in its energy. Unlocking and upgrading each of the swords is a relatively simple process, and to be quite honest with you, the lack of difficulty isn't really where the problem lies. It's the display and presentation presentation of the quest steps that's arguably worse than any other elemental wonder weapon upgrade that we have seen in Zombies history outside of maybe Die Machine in Voyage of Despair. Whether it's Origins Der Eisendrache, Ancient Evil, or even Alpha Omega, the art design and production of making these weapons feel epic is in the little details with how information is dealt to the player. Inside of Origins, you have Samantha chanting in your ear how you're so close to securing the keys, entering the crazy place through these magnificent portals, all while solving puzzles and collecting souls for these powerful elemental stabs. In Der Eisendrache, the Wrath of the Ancients is acquired by feeding 3 dragon heads that come alive from stone, while solving cleverly crafted puzzles that tell a story of the demonic trapped in the castle, or of a wolf who yearns for his master, as well as the unique gameplay steps like flying through the air to craft a star on the bastion, or mixing lightning and fire while wall running with anti-gravity. Each upgrade process is vivid, epic, and forever stuck in your mind. But Treyarch wasn't done there, as right before the player retrieves the final upgraded bow, we fill up a chest with zombie souls and a beam of light shoots out towards the sky as the bow then hovers ever so gently waiting to be picked up so that you can slaughter the undead. Ancient Evil also has simplistic steps similar to Citadelle des Morts, however each gauntlet has their own altar and base upgrade sequence, as well as specialized locations players teleport to in order to complete a challenge to prove that they are worthy of the gauntlet's upgraded variant. And while Citadelle des Morts swords are stylish and powerful in theory, the journey to build them is milquetoast at best, and this becomes even more underwhelming when you learn that there is no further upgrade path to them, whereas a map like Ancient Evil takes the gauntlets a step further, allowing players to upgrade them to an exalted level, satisfying the craving for those who like longer or challenging quests inside of their maps. And I suppose that this wouldn't be too big of a deal as long as Treyarch created another set of weapons that were genuinely amazing, but instead, developers used that secondary wonder weapon slot for something even worse: incantations. Usually inside of most maps, there are a few upgrade paths for a majority of wonder weapons. This could be the building process itself along with pack-a-punching the wonder weapon, or it could have a secondary upgrade quest that makes the weapon stronger. We have seen a lot of variations over the years, and Citadelle des Morts is again no exception. Treyarch has simply taken the concept of a second upgrade path for the sword and created what they call an incantation. Now, conceptually, the incantations are not a terrible idea, but they're certainly not exciting. And in fact, I believe out of all of the upgrade pathways inside of Citadelle, in terms of spectacle at least, the incantations are more exciting than the swords. The fire incantation has us utilizing some sort of fire tool to light these small bonfires which spawn in zombies, and eventually a doppelgast that will drop the Ankh of Ra from the Chaos story. The lightning incantation can be acquired by shooting down a horseshoe from the barn using the cannon to fast travel, where then lightning will strike the player as the horseshoe will fly across the map and then become the Horseshoe of Pegasus. The shadow incantation requires a Ravenclaw to be found, and if the player fast travels down the oubliette slide to spawn, a raven is sitting inside of that sewer, and when it is shot, the raven will drop his claw. The light incantation can be crafted by shooting a few crystals around the map that beam light to a specific area, where eventually a paladin's brooch spawns waiting to be collected. Once all of these pieces are collected, they need to be placed in specific areas around the map, where the player will then need to kill zombies and collect their souls to fill the incantation chest. And in order to open these chests, we will need to use the matching elemental sword. And while these steps are much more clever and engaging than the swords, and have much more personality while upgrading them, their issue is that they are incredibly lame tools to use, as they are simply alternate ammo types reskinned to take the player's equipment slot. In terms of the actual vitality of these wonder weapons and incantations, there is certainly a case to be made that they are powerful and useful for taking out zombies, but we're going to touch on that in the gameplay section of this video, so let's put a pin in that for now. While it's true that the wonder weapon upgrades are missing the fantastical presentation comparatively, this wouldn't really be as big of a problem if the upgrade process itself didn't roughly take up half of the main quest. It's the combination of both this blasé simplicity mixed with the fact that after we upgrade these weapons, the number of puzzles and challenges to complete are minimal. Now, that being said, this second half is when things really kick up. However, it's very short-lived despite it being very good game design. The player needs to break down a wall hidden inside of the Undercroft area, which reveals alchemy symbols that need to be shot in numerical order based on a simple logic puzzle from inside of the tavern at spawn. Once the code has been entered properly, a red orb that was trapped behind the wall gently hovers out, revealing a second hidden altar holding an ancient relic where the player places down 4 pages, each with a corresponding point of power trap symbol etched into the parchment. We then have to find and use the correct traps and kill zombies while doing so, and after all 4 traps have been cleansed, the orb will release from the last trap, traveling and revealing to what appears to be a secret chamber with one last riddle to solve. At this point in the main quest, I have to hand it to Treyarch. work. They really took the historical ancient magic artistry to great heights by having players use clever and interesting methods to reveal the key to this final puzzle. As I'm sure most of you watching this are aware, each armor suit has to be inflicted with its own elemental incantation and then saluted using their upgraded sword's inspect animation. Once all 4 knights have been honored, which is something that they had all been yearning for from their father, the owl, a mystic orb floating in the sky comes out of thin air, hovering down to head level while being upheld by an unknown energy from each of these bastard knights. This is exactly the right way to showcase just how important and mysterious a step is in a main quest. And although it isn't perfect, it has players using all of their resources and intuition in order to crack the code, where we are then rewarded with the result ceremoniously. From here, we need to take the mystic orb to each of the incantation locations to perform a challenge of sorts which fill the orb up with soul energy. The process of this step is ultimately okay, despite it lacking a bit of creativity, all things considered. Out of the 4 challenges, the light elemental challenge is the only one that is unique, where you need to run through the orbs to release that soul energy so that it can be collected. But the other 3 elemental types just need the player to either kill zombies with incantations or a fully charged wonder weapon. I'm just not really sure why Treyarch thought it was a good idea to not have more unique aspects to the step to make it feel not only more epic, but a little more challenging as well. I know accessibility is important to them, but so is variety and overcoming adversity through these puzzles. And instead of each orb location having a fun and individual obstacle to go alongside the soul harvesting, we end up with another mediocre step that does just enough to keep players engaged. However, once the orb is completely full, the player must take it to the secret area to finally open it up. Here we can see that there is a lair or study where the owl must have hidden away in order to collect his thoughts, or perhaps it was just to leave this message to his sons. The message that begins to play is just more manipulation from the owl to his bastards, speaking in a manner that could truly apply to any of them, congratulating them, stating that they're the sole winner to this carefully hidden riddle, further perpetuating this illusion that their father thinks that they are special when they are anything but. However, he also tells them that he has hidden the amulet inside of the Guardian and that it needs to be defeated in order to gather this reward. The player can then grab the Guardian key lying on the table and make their way back to spawn to activate the final boss encounter. The Guardian is of course the large monument in the center of spawn. The owl had placed a curse on it so that if anyone did make it this far in order to grab the amulet, they would have to face this monstrosity. And so here we are. Slamming us into another dimension, we begin trying to take down the beast in one of the best boss battles we have ever had in Treyarch Zombies history. The use of stone armor on the Guardian that when broken reveals weak spots is a nice touch mixed with his violent, aggressive nature, making things feel not so bullet spongy and more based on this amazing omni-movement system that Black Ops 6 Zombies has to offer. What's really wonderful about this boss is that once he has depleted enough health, he will go into a lockdown phase where the owl speaks to whom he thinks is his son, letting them know how weak and pathetic they are. It's a really nice touch. And after each cooldown phase from the Guardian, he comes back even more aggressive with more movesets than before, while the boss arena itself begins to shrink in size as lava pulls in, causing damage to the player if they stray too far, meaning that you have to stay up close and personal to this boss while being on your A game. This is a boss fight that no matter how many times I play it, I barely make it out alive and my heart is beating out of my chest. And while I wish there were a couple of adjustments made to make the fight have a mix of damage-based gameplay and specific phases, I still think that overall it is an amazing boss fight, and hats off to Treyarch for executing everything so well. As I'm sure you could assume, once the Guardian has been defeated, the amulet is now ours for the taking, and then the ending cutscene will start to play. This cutscene is rather dramatic, showcasing the death of Kraft getting killed by zombies, which essentially makes our efforts to save him as a prisoner all for naught. But we do learn some more information about where the next location is for our crew, along with the fact that Kraft had been withholding a secret from us this entire time. And while Kraft is lying there bleeding on the floor, he mentions to utter with his one last gasping breath, "Oh shit, that was the wrong clip. Sorry guys, here we go."
Please don't kill him. He is my son. He's your what?
This is a wild revelation and shows just how depraved and sick Richtofen is, as he will clearly go to any lengths to secure himself a better tomorrow. And it's clear that Kraft forgives Richtofen despite being tortured by his own son, as even after everything that has happened here, Kraft is now begging them to not kill Richtofen. And you can see the looks of confusion upon our crew's face when hearing this request, as one of the primary goals here is retribution, as not only Richtofen betrayed Requiem, but he locked them up in Terminus and manipulated Maxis as well. In terms of the main plot, all of this sets up the future of the Dark Ether story in a very promising way moving forward, as now Treyarch has plenty of room to breathe and hopefully takes us to some amazing locations as this narrative continues to blossom. With all of that being said, we still need to circle back to what the purpose is for DLC 1, as well as the important markers of what makes a Zombies map exceptional. Citadelle des Morts misses out on a great opportunity to carry out its own unique story in a much more epic way, while also pushing the larger plot of Black Ops 6 Zombies forward. And rather than drive Citadelle's story exposition through the gameplay and main quest, the developers used a blog post to do the heavy lifting. And I know it's not all bad, as we've touched on how the developers' art direction here is magnificent, from the chilling and sinister tone all the way to the unique boss arena and enemy design. There really isn't much to pick apart. Also, learning about the connection between Kraft and Richtofen was very exciting, and the fact that a dig site is mentioned in the cutscene teasing the new DLC 2 map, that's also quite interesting. These subtle nods towards Origins and the leftover Chaos story pieces make for quite compelling content, so no issues there. But there are still many questions to be answered, such as what happened inside of Liberty Falls with Richtofen getting trapped in the Dark Ether, not to mention everything going on with Samantha Maxis, and we can't forget about Project Janus security team and how they were bamboozled by Dr. Pericles Panos. There are now so many balls being juggled in the air, the story could really go anywhere, which has both its fair number of positives and negatives, but to reiterate, what we are discussing now is deeper and missing from Citadelle's core identity, because while there is a lot of greatness to sift through, we know from previous experiences that Treyarch is capable of so much more, and I think it's really important that we talk about it. If we look at Treyarch's previous works, we can learn quite a bit, as inside of Der Eisendrache or Ancient Evil for example, while the player is navigating through the main quest, there are other characters inside of the storyline that are taunting us, getting upset with us, or begging for our help while even rewarding us for our trouble. This can be seen in the case of Dr. Groff, the Oracle, or Perseus, but inside of Citadelle there is all this hullabaloo about the owl and his bastard sons, but you wouldn't know how important it is if it weren't for the blog post or the fact that Kraft is sparingly telling us about them over the radio. And if the owl is truly an important historical figure who took down the Knights Templar and crafted an entire puzzle for his bastard sons to solve, then why isn't he speaking to us while we are going through his ruse? Imagine for a moment that he trapped his spirit in the castle, and once activated by us, he realizes we are not his sons and then creates even more difficult challenges for us to overcome, taunting us while we are upgrading the swords, hiding things in different locations around the map, or altering the order of the soul boxes for the incantations. Just something to make it feel like we have an antagonist of sorts other than going after the looming threat of Richtofen, whom we haven't seen since the intro cutscene of Liberty Falls. Because if this amulet is so damn special, you think there would be a bit more omnipotence inside of the castle if the end goal is to retrieve it. We get a brief glimpse of what this could be like during the final boss fight while the Guardian locks down in between phases, and it's so fucking sick. I can't imagine how much more badass the main quest would have been knowing that we are being harassed and at the mercy of this once powerful entity. Now, we have already touched on the lack of creativity when it comes to upgrading the swords by using other maps as counterexamples, and this same thread of problematic creativity can be applied in other ways throughout Citadelle des Morts. The Alchemical Lab, while it's clever on the surface to have it hidden behind a secret wall, when you combine this with the shallow depth alongside the other aspects of the quest, it makes you wonder, why aren't there more hidden chambers? Or why wasn't this alchemical lab a little more tricky to open? Perhaps Kraft or Ravenov could have alluded to it from overhearing Franco talk about it, or maybe we could have found blueprints of the castle showcasing secret rooms that all have puzzles to open them, as just getting near this wall automatically makes it disappear, requiring no effort to actually get in. Something else that's disappointing is the naming of the Pack-a-Punch area being called the Oubliette. This is by definition part of a castle that is accessible only from a trapdoor on the ceiling, but instead the Oubliette is accessed by buying a door. It's small things like this that can turn a simple gameplay mechanic from average to exciting. And while Treyarch hasn't done anything wrong by implementing these features the way they have, I can't help but feel uninspired by some of these choices, as even the Lion Sword secret room is useless along with the Owl's hidden hidden chamber. Why didn't Treyarch use these spaces more throughout the Easter egg, or at the very least, why couldn't we have used these spaces for camping, or just to have open as a fun reward for solving the map's main quest? Now, the last thing I want to touch upon is Maya's storyline, as this whole side quest, or whatever you want to call it, was implemented so strangely, making it hard to figure out where to place it inside of this review. I would like to establish first that I love in-game cutscenes, mid-game boss fights, and any other sort of unexpected twist like this that flips the core Zombies main quest gameplay loop on its head. Now, earlier in the video, we discussed how at the end of Terminus, Maya learned that Franco was here in Avalon, which is why she wanted to tag along so she could kill Franco for imprisoning and mutilating her brother. And Treyarch went all out with this sequence, and while I would much rather have this in the map than not, the execution of this entire scene is very out of place and doesn't quite feel earned, mostly because I think the devs focused on all the wrong elements that make things like this so special. So right after we interact with Kraft, Maya is able to seek her revenge by going up to the second floor of the dining hall and knock on a door where Franco is hiding behind. She tricks him into opening it, and the player is able to wander down a number of tight hallways while killing zombies along the way. Eventually, Maya makes her way to Franco by blowing down a locked door as he sits on the ground, cowering in fear, accepting the reality that life is nearing its bitter end.
Why won't you just fucking die? Wait! Killing me won't bring your brother back. You know he wouldn't want this.
This isn't for Nathan. This is for me.
Now that is straight up a beautiful cutscene, ain't no doubt about that. But what is its actual purpose? Did it even have to be made? Well, I would argue no, it doesn't serve a purpose, and I think it didn't have to be made, and that it was only made just to have a cool cutscene, which, like I said, that's fine. Now obviously the go-to comparison here would be Ancient Evil, as it's clear that's where Treyarch drew their inspiration, and for good reason, as it was an excellent mid-game cinematic. But the reason the mini cutscene worked so well was due to a number of reasons, one of them being the fact that the Chaos Crew were excellently written, but also because it was part of the main quest, it only activated when playing as Bruno or Shaw, it was an act of betrayal from Bruno that caused Shaw to become an active participant against his will, and it also made sense to the overall plot as it introduced a new problem of potential subversion from allies who now lack the ability to control themselves. However, when it comes to Maya, I know we're supposed to be on her side in this situation, but her story has barely been fleshed out, and Treyarch wants us to feel this deep-seated hatred and revenge sowing in her heart while she pursues the men who wronged her, and I get that, but for any of that feeling to transfer to the viewer or the player, we need more than generic tropes or blog posts to help get us there. We also know barely anything about Franco other than he is a generic villain and is part of the reason that Nathan's body and mind were butchered, but what were the reasons behind Franco's actions? Give us the ability to empathize with him as well. This would be helpful as compelling villains are ones you can relate to but ultimately know are in the wrong. But as far as Franco goes, we have no real reason to hate him viscerally. And while the cinematic is masterly crafted with epic acting and has all of the visual works, once the murder is finished, the now shallow puddle of a subplot is all dried up, implying that Maya has no real reason to even be with us anymore since her business with our crew is ostensibly complete. This theme is constant throughout the entire main quest, where the activities in Citadelle de Mort are just good enough, showcasing that there is no problem with the secrets in this map, but again, it's all about how these features are implemented, which is subpar. This lack of imagination outside of the core gameplay loop is really antithetical to the peak era of Zombies between 2015 and 2019. And don't get it twisted, this isn't even me advocating for the Black Ops 4 style of Easter eggs, while I would personally love that. I am merely attempting to remind Treyarch that the maps themselves are also characters in their own right, which need to be developed alongside the gameplay and narrative so that the thematic nature of these experiences come to fruition via the main quest challenges, puzzles, and Easter egg steps. And again, whenever the first Zombies DLC comes to the game, it's supposed to tick many boxes by not only building off of the excellence of a game's launch, but to also kick things up a notch by giving the map its own isolated story, solidifying the artistic vision of the season, as well as pushing the main plot forward. And while the 50,000-foot view of BO6 Zombies' core storyline is interesting and was executed well through Citadelle's main cutscenes and intel, the depth and nuance inside of previous Zombies experiences clearly show what can be done, making it a bit disappointing when the fruits of Treyarch's developmental labor fall shy of the finish line. The core gameplay loop is where the map really shines and utilizes the atmospheric tensions much more advantageously compared to the main quest. The fog makes it difficult to see the vermin and parasites, bringing a chilling sensation on the first few playthroughs, as the map's close quarters and many spawn locations make it tough to discern where they are really coming from. The guttural whine from the doppelgast as he is barreling towards you while juking your shots is both tense and thrilling. And last but not least, zombies crowd around players so quickly that if you don't have a planned escape ready to go at a moment's notice, you will be knocking at death's door, unless of course an amalgam decides to quickly snatch you at the last second. We've all been there. Ultimately, what makes the gameplay loop so enjoyable is of course the baseline Black Ops 6 Zombies mechanics, but also the level design. And what I find to be most compelling about Citadelle's layout is the juxtaposition between the density and narrow nature of the map's insides and how jarring it really can be, where then the player can just merely take a few steps beyond the castle gates and have an almost freeing experience, allowing you to run around or train until your heart's content. This serves a variety of purposes, creating a situation of risk and reward by allowing skilled players to hoard zombies in tight spaces to churn through rounds quickly, but if you'd like a bit more space, that is also a viable option. This allows players to take their time to achieve whatever goal they are pursuing. But even if you do choose to travel to a more open area, players still need to exercise caution, as now there is more room for zombies to swarm you with the BO6 zombie spawn system at play, making it wise to keep certain sections of the map closed off if you want to use these more spacious locales. What's ironic about all of this is that the areas that seem the most daunting at first glance end up being more friendly to player engagement, such as the oubliette, the undercroft, or even the dungeon. And this is again why the word irony comes to mind, because the spaces players think they should be using don't function in the fashion they've typically intuited and or potentially have repercussions for engaging with them as such. All this to say that this would naturally entail a higher skill ceiling to master Citadelle, at least mechanically speaking. Treyarch also ensured that traversing the map was easier than ever, which in my opinion is always a good thing. Whichever way players want to maneuver through the map, it is completely possible. There are multiple fast travel points that bring players to key locations which allow quick escapes and also makes navigating the main quest quite fun when you optimize it correctly. And even if using fast travels really isn't your thing, it's not that big of a deal, as running around the map is a completely viable option and doesn't take away from the core experience at all. It's no secret that high rounds in Black Ops 6 are in a bit of a weird place. On one hand, they are much more difficult than they were in Cold War, much more varied than they were in Black Ops 4, but they're not nearly as versatile as they were in Black Ops 3. There is a lot of abusing exploits which can be a bit annoying, but overall they heavily rely on the use of mutant injection spam, which is a poor solution to the perceived problem of making high rounds more difficult and or balanced. However, Citadelle de Mort has some of the best high round gameplay in Black Ops 6 so far. There are a multitude of strategies to get up to the high 60s or even 70s. This can be done simply by training and hoarding up zombies in those tight and closed spaces we talked about a moment ago, which can lead to some really enjoyable, fast, high round gameplay, and it's just that adrenaline pumping fun that's really addictive about COD Zombies. It's also completely viable to train outside by the barn on the dirt path, as leading zombies up and down through the path loop makes for an opportune moment of hoarding up the undead underneath the gate for a quick and simple slaughtering. This is much different compared to Terminus and Liberty Falls, where training into the 60s and 70s is not really a safe option due to the drastic difference in level design, where things are either super tight-knit or overly open to their detriment, thus relying on cheap tactics and exploits. Not to mention the addition of Vulture Aid, which has essentially enhanced the high round experience inside of BO6 writ large, but it also really suits the aggressive map design of Citadelle quite nicely by allowing players to replenish their equipment slot with relative ease. This not only allows for things like decoy grenades and Casimirs to be re-earned quickly, but gives players an opportunity to save their salvage for the late game, which of course leads to the mutant injection strategy. And even though the mutant injection is a get out of jail free card, the core strategy of mixing Casimirs, field upgrades, and wonder weapons is something that requires a decent amount of skill, focus, and practice, showcasing that the traditional high rounding experience is a little deeper than our first impressions would grant. Oh yeah, I forgot! We actually need to talk about these damn wonder weapons now. Alright, so we've already discussed how the presentation or quest implementation of the swords isn't up to snuff, especially when we take a look back in Zombies history to see how Treyarch curated their quests. And while all of that is clearly super important, none of it would matter if the weapons themselves were completely detestable. And fortunately, they're pretty damn awesome. I don't think they're perfect by any means, but they're very powerful, and with a few tweaks, they could be some of the best wonder weapons in the Zombies franchise. What's been very enjoyable about the swords specifically is that they are similar to the Beam Smasher, meaning that you have to take your time to learn how to master this weapon. They're not something you can just pick up, start swinging, and become a zombie's god in just one match. They are a bit finicky, particular, and each has its own unique set of abilities which cater to different playstyles and player preference. How each sword works is, of course, they have an elemental ability associated with it. Kills will charge that ability up, and that can all be indicated by the blade itself, which is super fucking cool. Keep doing things like that, Treyarch. I love that. And once the blade is fully charged, you can either throw the charge shot or continue to kill zombies while that elemental damage spills onto the undead more frequently. The dragon sword is probably the worst of the bunch, mainly because the charge shot isn't prioritizing duration. And since zombies spawn so erratically in this game, it can be tricky to take out whole hordes at a time without missing a few stragglers here and there. The lion sword is a solid choice for all playstyles, as not only does it have a great ultimate ability similar to the chakrams of vengeance from Black Ops 4, it can replenish your armor through both regular kills and the ultimate ability activation. And while it would be nice if that main ability lasted a few seconds longer, as diving into a horde of zombies headfirst is just super satisfying, but if you're not careful, you can get stuck. However, the sword does charge up relatively quickly, making it feel decently balanced, if not a bit underpowered. Now, the stag and raven sword are clearly the best of the four, which is fantastic because they behave so differently. The stag sword's charge shot is super badass, as a beam of electricity penetrates zombies and doppelgasts, not to mention melts through the amalgams. It also has one of the faster swings out of all of the swords, making it a dream to use for players like myself that like quick gameplay with amazing particle effects all over my screen. The raven sword, on the other hand, has become a community favorite for a reason, as not only does it resemble the days of Black Ops 3's Shadows of Evil with the Apothecant Servant, it's just a blast to use between getting kills, charging it up, and pulling off that satisfying overhead swing and sucking up an entire horde to be sent off to the dark ether. Now, while the swords overall are in a pretty damn solid place, I still think Treyarch is missing the mark ever so slightly when it comes to what a wonder weapon's job is supposed to be, which is to save the player's life and looking cool while doing so. And so the main issue with the swords as of now is that they can only kill 2 zombies at a time. And while I think an obvious resolution to this problem would be to increase the amount of zombies you can kill, I don't think it's quite as simple as just turning the dial all the way up. When looking at the Apothecant sword inside of Shadows of Evil, that weapon was designed much differently than how the Bastard sword upgrades are treated inside of Citadelle. The Apothecant sword is able to kill multiple zombies at a time while using its charge shot, making it a massive asset for players to use in tandem with the Apothecant Servant. However, the Apothecant sword was on a timer and required kills to charge it up to even be used in the first place. Thus, since it's a limited time weapon, making it overpowered during that window of opportunity is actually rather balanced. And I think that's a largely fair assumption to make. But the difference is the zombie spawn system inside of Black Ops 6 is fundamentally different and tuned for radical speeds and beatdowns from the zombies at what seems like every second. In any game of Black Ops 6, if you run straight through a spaced out horde of zombies, you will likely get swiped by every single one. And if a zombie runs up from behind you to come in front of the player, you will also get swiped. While in Black Ops 3 or even Black Ops 4 to some extent, the zombies don't behave in quite the same way, meaning that if you run straight through an open group of zombies, you'll likely not get hit. And the same goes for zombies coming up from behind and to the side of you. So what the hell does any of this mean? And I promise I am getting there. It means that while inside Shadows of Evil, the Apothecant sword needed to be charged up so that when it actuated, it was on a timer. This meant it had to have an inherently overpowered nature for balance despite having less aggressive zombies. Whereas in Citadelle Day More, we have permanent access to the swords at any given moment, which also required to be charged with kills to use the ultimate ability, but we can't kill as many enemies despite having a much more aggressive zombie system in game. There is also the fact that the swing speed for the Apothecant sword is the same speed of the sword swing with Melee Macchiato's augment being acquired, which is another point of contention I just don't fully understand when you again look at the speed of gameplay inside of Black Ops 6 and what they're ultimately going for. Am I making sense here? I'd like to think that I am, but I don't even know anymore. Either way, there is likely some sweet spot in the middle where perhaps Treyarch could increase the amount of kills needed to charge the sword's ultimate ability, but allow us to also kill more zombies simultaneously so that we can combat the aggression from the hordes as well as the numerous amount of them on screen at any given moment. These changes could be adjusted by adding or reshaping augments on Melee Macchiato, or perhaps they could make the base swing speed of the swords as fast as what the augment makes them, allowing us to choose another major augment. I mean, they are wonder weapons after all. Should they not be overpowered based on the systems Treyarch has designed? I know that game development is not as simple as flipping switches, and there are probably good reasons for why Treyarch designed things the way that they did, but again, when you look at the history of the franchise and see how things have been in prior experiences, I can't help but wonder why there appear to be such glaring contradictions. That being said, my real complaints from a gameplay experience mostly reside within the incantations. And now I know we talked about how the quests to build these are good, and that is true, but I just don't understand why Treyarch thought it would be a good idea to make them slightly stronger alternate ammo types. Inside of this map, we have Elemental Pop with its augments, the swords, and the incantations, all with overlapping elemental abilities. And as we discussed in the previous section with the swords, they are largely original feeling with their own unique effects, or at least they are exacerbated from the typical AAT on the player's gun, but the incantations, on the other hand, no pun intended, are simply AAT reskins which add to the pile of corpses that is imagination. When building out wonder weapons, they should be more powerful and able to save the player at a moment's notice, which the swords do, but since there was no second upgrade quest, it would be safe to presume that the incantations would have a similar aggressive offensive ability like their counterpart. So rather than having a typical AAT animation, why couldn't each elemental type have its own fully unique ability? For example, the fire incantation could shoot a large fireball out and slowly burn alive the zombies, or perhaps it could have been a flamethrower coming out of the player's hand. The light incantation could possibly suck down the zombies similar to Alistair's Annihilator, leaving a pile of health to pick up when the player is ready. Those are just a few of the ideas that come to mind, which means that actual talented people could come up with way better ideas than I ever could. But that doesn't mean that these incantations are all bad, because that is simply not the case. The fire and lightning incantations are able to one-shot the amalgams, which make them almost a must-have during a Citadelle playthrough. And I think that Treyarch did a great job placing incantation chests all around the map, giving players the ability to cycle through them rapidly, meaning that they are meant to be used constantly and to help pick apart the hordes while also replenishing quickly using the Vulture Aid Picky Eater augment. In summary, it's not that these incantations are bad or that they don't have a use case, it's just another missed opportunity in terms of the main quest steps, the lack of bombastic effects, and not playing to the strength of the castle history and individual lore of the map. After the plethora of side content in both Terminus and Liberty Falls, I was hoping for the same level of detail from Treyarch inside of Citadelle des Morts, and unfortunately, in a similar fashion to the atmospheric depth, story, and main quest, the side content is really just mediocre. And while there really are a lot of side quests to complete, they're mostly just a way to get free perks, and there's nothing that really takes advantage of the map's atmosphere and castle magic. Of course, it's great to have ammo mods, free perks, and all the loot, but making things a little meatier would have been nice. There are a lot of fluff side quests that didn't just seem to really do anything. Things like lighting a bunch of fireplaces which shoot fireballs at the zombies for a few minutes, or firing yourself out of the lion cannon 100 times. What are the purpose of any of these? Sure, I suppose they can be fun, but do they add to the story? Is it just an inside joke for the developers? Like, I just don't understand. I would like to know if there is a little more to it. Other quests like bartending, the chess piece, and the Rat King Easter eggs are much better, but I would still argue they're just okay. A map of this stature needs to have epic side quests along the more silly or purposeless content in order to balance out the character of the map, especially when there is a moody atmosphere at play. This is why out of all of the side content that there is in Citadel, the Lockdown in the Undercroft is clearly the best side quest, as it builds off of the lore and mythos of the map by using the alchemy symbols on the wall alongside the incantations. And while the reward for doing this isn't anything special, it's better than nothing, but that's not really what's important here, because what I truly hope for more than anything is that Treyarch continues to build out quests like this, because if they are going to focus on accessibility in spite of things like art direction, the main quest, and narrative exposition, the least they can do is satiate the hardcore player base by building out challenging and meaningful side Easter egg content that rewards players with special weapons, or secret content that extrapolates and expands on the map itself. When looking back at the rich history of Call of Duty Zombies, there is example after example where Treyarch rewards and creates payoffs for player curiosity, and that curiosity was devised solely off of bits and pieces that were inside of the unique world that game devs had imagined for us. Developers used to make the best of a location and dive in deep to show off how clever they were by almost daring players to go to great lengths to uncover their secrets. Whereas in Citadel, things feel almost random or disconnected from the core lore, making it seem like if you want to learn about the map itself, you need to read a blog post as opposed to simply playing it. That being said, despite of the more glaring flaws inside of Citadelle des Morts, it really is a great map. However, it does seem as if Treyarch just did the bare minimum, not in terms of gameplay design or the systems inside of the map, but more so regarding the main quest and narrative functions compared to what they used to be able to get away with before this modern era of Call of Duty Zombies. Little details are what help mend the seams of any artistic vision, no matter if it's movies, music, or video games, and I can't help but feel like that is just completely missing here, because for better or worse, Treyarch has defined what we can expect from here on out: a focus on accessibility, a more grounded, realistic approach to things, similar simpler Easter eggs and less spectacle. And so in terms of fulfilling the duty of DLC 1, was Treyarch successful? Well, I think the answer is yes. This is the new era of zombies, and these are the expectations players need to now manage for the remainder of the Black Ops 6 season. And while that's not inherently a bad thing, it does make me less excited about the future maps in terms of their magnificence. Fortunately, Citadelle de Mort's execution of base gameplay, wonder weapons, and the boss battle are exceptionally fun, but I can't help but wonder how much greater things would have been if Treyarch lathered an epic coat of paint on top of this dilapidated castle, elevating things to a whole other level.